number of ways we can present themselves is practically infinite. I mean, I've had really weird experiences with information. For instance, you know, these flashers on buildings where the news goes by. I've had hallucinations where it became a textual hallucination. In other words, what I was seeing was an illuminated page of print. And then as I looked at it, every 50th letter would invert, and then suddenly every 20th, and then every 10th, and then every 5th, and I literally wouldn't come through again in a loop. I mean, I think anything you can conceive of, it can do, and many things you can't conceive of.
I mean, we're all individuals. We all have the gift of bringing our own ideas.
But still, you have to be able to make general statements about it, or you would have to say that it's all and everything. One of the well, although how would you know, since you would never have any truth but your own? One of the things that happens on psilocybin and on ayahuasca that really puzzles me, that I just go back to again and again, is you can be having these volleys of hallucination, and then you can say to it, Art Deco, and click, and suddenly there will be thousands of cigarette lighters, limousines, candy dishes, stuff rolling in black space in front of you. Thousands of these things perfectly exemplifying this very narrowly defined aesthetic domain. Italian Baroque, click, all the saints with their eyes rolled back, dripping gold, the whole thing. And so you say, boy, that is really strange. We click through aesthetic epochs like points on a dial, but then you can say to it, surprise me. In Baroque, not Empire, not dynastic Egypt, not North American Indian, Maya, or Fujiwara Japanese, but something never seen on this planet, but equally coherent as those other styles. And I always think, my God, if I could just grab hold of this, I would be Yves Saint Laurent or Klimt or somebody like that. The mushroom has a personality, and like all personalities, it excludes some things and includes others. The mushroom personality is a radically eccentric personality. The mushroom talks about transforming the planet. It says, I come from a distant part of the galaxy. I have 500 million years of galactic history in my databank. I have seen 50,000 worlds come into existence and pass out of existence. I've seen ships the size of Australia depart for Andromeda. I've seen this, I've seen that. I'm willing to show you the newsreels of it. That kind of and it says, your world is ending. Put your furry paw into my hand, and together we will march out to the stars. It's this dun 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 dun. Well, so then you take a compound or a shamanic hallucinogen like ayahuasca. Chemically, this is very, very similar to DMT. Experientially, it could hardly be more different. Ayahuasca does not show you images of enormous machines in orbit around alien planets and that sort of thing. Ayahuasca, first of all, it doesn't speak. It shows. You become like the eye of a camera, flying through a world. And what it shows you is much more feminine. It shows you water flowing over the land. It shows you plants life growing and dying. It shows you the movement of glaciers over the surface of the land. It shows you people burying their dead. It shows you archaic civilization. It shows you women nursing their children. It shows you meat. It shows you the stuff of this world on every level. And it moves you to tears. I mean, it's emotive. It's not about our cosmic... Actually, I've never quite had this myself, but many people report DMT trips where not pleased at all and demand
And it's this, you know, who are you? And one person described being then just hurled through all of time, like exploded back from the shin of ontogeny, and it's weird stuff. Ways as I described, but some people report, and these may be synergies with antidepressants or something like that, but apparently very stable and strange world. I mean, worlds with alien peoples and animals and cities and, you know, very science fiction-y stuff. That's why this Bell's theorem, I don't think we use that word, but this non-locality that we talked about may have something to do with the phenomenon of the imagination. Like, it's occurred to me over the years that what we call imagination might simply be a hyperdimensional perception, and you're actually seeing worlds and places that truly exist somewhere scattered through the galaxies like grains of sand, but no place you will ever contact or visit in the flesh, but that the data is somehow present. There seems to be some kind of tuning thing that needs to go on. You know, possibly with technology. I had a really weird experience years ago. I took LSD one evening with a bunch of people, and it was fairly casual and social, and smoked a bunch of weed, and this went on for a couple of hours, and it didn't really ever seem to come on, and it just seemed to be very light. And then I climbed on my motorcycle and went home and decided I would go to bed, and I decided before going to bed, and I stand-up electrical resistance heaters that you get in at the Salvation Army, you know, if you're a poor student. And I said, so I turned it on as I started to smoke this joint, and it was badly wired, and it made this sound like, and as I began to listen to this sound, I like went to lizard land. And I entered into this completely coherent thing which lasted for hours about this world inhabited by these intelligent reptilian beings. And we went through their art, their history, their theories of jewelry, their philosophy, their polity, their science, their religion, their fashion, and it was like endless stuff about this very specific reptilian world. Well, then later I tried again. I took LSD with my arm around my heater, and had by then been preaching it in the streets. And I could never really find my way back, you know, which is a typical phenomenon of higher dimensional phase space. Ralph taught me, you know, doing the reverse of what you did doesn't steer you back to where you started. You have to find your way forward through the matrix. Kat and I were in the Amazon in '76 taking ayahuasca. We got in with this certain group of people in Peru that took it every week. And, you know, cultures have different ways of handling hassle. And in some cultures it's confrontational, in other cultures not. The way these Peruvian country folk operated was, if somebody was screwing up, nobody would ever say so. They would just talk about these people behind their back until the morphogenetic field of gossip was so strong that you would basically awaken to the problem. So there was a complex social situation going on in this ayahuasca circle, which was, there was a master shaman who we were apprenticed to, who was beloved by his neighborhood.
but he had a nephew, a sobrino, who was a jerk. And this guy was, as Don Fidel said, ambitious. He dealt a little weed, he did a little pimping, he was just sort of an edge runner type of guy. And every Saturday night we would all get together and take ayahuasca, about 30 of us. Older shamans, our guy, people from the neighborhood, and this sobrino, Don Jose. So, I don't know what the real history of it was, because I had just arrived on the scene. But these old guys would sing these icaros, these magical songs on ayahuasca that appear as colored tapestries in front of your eyes. And you know, they had soul, they were into it, and this guy would sing against them. I mean, it's the rudest thing you can possibly imagine. I mean, imagine if you know, Lou Reed were trying to give a performance and the guy in the third row just launched into Old Man River and kept at it, you know? I mean, in this town, I'm sure large guys would appear and say, "Sir." In Peru, it didn't work like that. They just kept singing, he kept singing, and it was clear that this is how it was going to be handled, that we had just divided into two separate entities here. Well, my wife was sitting next to me, and he was sitting across the room from us, the sobrino, and I had been watching him for a long time, and I was loaded to the gills, and I could see he would get up on his haunches, and he looked like a monkey. His face, it was uncanny. He looked like a monkey, and he also looked kind of like a jackal, a dog with long teeth. Kept going through these changes, and Kat leaned over to me and said something like, "This guy's an asshole." And I just said, you know, let it slide. What do we know? Think of it as anthropology. But she wasn't having it. So after a while, he kept doing this, and at one point, and everybody in the room, every person in the room was bummed out, and they were looking at their laps. All eye contact was broken. It's actually, when I was a kid, I invented a word. The word is fardao, and it means the embarrassment you feel when someone else fucks up. You know, and you happen to just be there, but somehow the aura of it is so strong. So the entire room is just awash in fardao, and the old guys are singing, and the guy is singing. So then at the end of a particularly intense clash of these two styles, my wife just looked across the room at this guy and like put the whammy on him. And I saw these red arrows leave her eyes and like dotted lines go across them. And they move fairly slowly, you know, more slowly than you could throw a ball or something. Well, when this line of red arrows got to this guy, he was knocked off his feet. He fell backwards with his legs in the air, and there was a big noise. And all the singing stopped, and everybody in the room looked up, and these three old shamans who were sitting behind Don Fidel, who I, to that point, had not heard speak any language but Quechua, one turned to the other and he says in Spanish, "Oh, the gringa sends the suburba." The girlfriend in the other dimension, the mushroom, once I said to her, I said, "What should I call you?" And she said, "Call me Dorothy." So I invoke it, and it comes, and then we're off. And sometimes it's easy and loving, and sometimes it's different. I remember one very epic trip I had where I had tossed out a big compost pile from growing mushrooms years ago in another country. Actually, it was a past life, I'm now recalling. But anyway, I tossed out this stuff, and this thing grew, this humongous mushroom. And I had taken mushrooms the previous Saturday. I had taken a full dose, which is 5 dried grams. So I thought, I want to take mushrooms again this Saturday, but I think I may have picked up a tolerance. So I'll just take 9 grams instead. And this is where the learning takes place. The mistakes. Treasure your mistakes. So the thing, it's like I'm sitting there and suddenly I realize, oh my God, it's coming at me. It's 100 miles wide. It's 10 miles high. And it's just rolling toward me. It looks, and I barely had time to lay down. That's how fast it, and a voice said, you know, prepare, the storm is about to hit the beach. And I laid down, and it was like a tornado hitting. And at one point I opened my eyes, and there was this woman in a full bondage getup with piercings and rubber panties and the whole thing. And I was lying there between her legs. She was standing upright, and she put her face right down next to mine, and she said, "Is it strong enough for you, asshole?" To which I replied, "Yes." And then she said, "They say it helps to close your eyes, cowboy." And I later, in thinking about that trip, I realized the reason the mushroom addressed me as cowboy is because that's most people mushrooms have met have been cowboys and cowgirls, because they're the people who follow the cows. And most people have encountered this thing in the pasture. You know, Maria Sabina, the mushroom shamanist of Oaxaca, claimed not to have been initiated. She claimed that as a child left to watch the sheep and the cows, she had been hungry and had gotten into eating mushrooms. Once I was in India and I was cornered. This guy, I was loaded actually on mescaline, and this guy swam aboard my houseboat, and normally I just would run these guys off because they were thieves and beggars, but I was so loaded, so I couldn't do anything but sit there. And this guy came up to me and sat down across from me and looked at me, and after a few minutes he said, "Face is index of mind." And I said, "Ranji, I can't be interrogated now." But it was this thing. He could see face is index of mind. My mind was swirling visibly there.
Game over. Begin.
At times appeared to work miracles. At one point I was trying to test him and his abilities, and I recalled that there was a box that my grandfather had given me that you opened with a little silver key that had been lost for years and years. And I said, "Well, if you can do anything, why don't you produce the key that to that box?" Which neither of us had seen even the box for a dozen years. By this time, he was naked and locked in a room at the mission. And he went and he would make these bizarre gestures, these strange I don't know what was going on. And he went into a period of concentration, gave a wild squawk, and slammed into my hand and gave me the key. Gave me the key. He was naked. He had been locked in this room for 14 days at that time. And I was like, I didn't know what was going on. But what was happening to me was, I was like utterly unconcerned for his mental health or any practical concern, which was causing a lot of problems for the other people on the expedition. In classical psychology, this is called a folie à deux, a delusion of two. It's a simultaneous schizophrenic episode. It usually involves a mother and a daughter. I've never heard of a brother-brother soleil à deux. But it was accompanied by all these exterior manifestations, freak rainbows, and in my case, an encounter with a UFO. And this UFO encounter had a very curious quality to it. Not that they don't always, I suppose. But this was even more curious than the pedestrian UFO encounter. What happened was it was on the 13th day of the reversal. And
Game over.
That I had this intimation. There was something going on about the Southwest. I wasn't clear quite what it was, and the two women on the expedition were that afternoon washing our clothes down by the Choro, by the lake, and I looked across the lake and I saw in the sky, not a rainbow, but just a spot in the sky that was a spectrogrammatic diffraction. You know, a little patch of rainbow. And I asked the women if they saw it, and they said they didn't. And then it intensified. And by this time, I was plenty in the doghouse as well. I mean, this put a great deal of strain on our small party, as you can imagine. And this spectrogrammatic iridule intensified. And then I said to them, now do you see it? And they looked, and they said, oh yeah, it's, you know, big deal, not much, but I knew, and knowing means the voice was speaking to me. All kinds of weird things went on. I mean, I discovered that the closer I was to water, the easier it was for me to rhyme. Which I've never, and then years later I encountered a Celtic saying, poetry is made at the edge of running water. And the thing would give me these aphorisms. Like one time it said, the clone's load is a stoned mode. And, you know, and I was not sleeping. I was now 11 days without sleep. So that night I decided to sit by the Choro and just, because I stayed up all night and I would walk in the fields, and the thing would connect up the constellations for me and show me where they were in the sky. There was also embedded in all this thing the intimation of this thing called the teacher, which was a giant insect-like thing that was always like right over here. And there was the sense of something watching us from the sky, something moving us very, very gently but persistently toward this very weird breakthrough.
Triangle.
What I hear you asking is, what about the dark side of psychedelics? And I think that's certainly worth talking about. It isn't a joyride necessarily. One thing that is quite wonderful about psychedelics is that, and I'll just speak of the mushroom in this case, is that it's wonderfully kind to beginners. But if you are an acolyte of the priesthood, sooner or later it will scare the socks off you.
Hexagon.
And in many ways it can do this. In fact, that's what's so scary about it, is it knows the way to scare you, just like it knows everything else about you. And so in my talk I stressed the facility with which one can access these places, and I sort of teased yoga. It is easy to access these places. The question is then, but is it easy to control and manipulate and understand these places? And this is where it can turn you every way but loose. This is where you want to have your mantras polished and your yantras ready. Because in that domain, it all works.
all that malarkey that doesn't ever work anywhere else. In that domain, it works. And so I think one should have techniques, the ring pass not, or mantras, something that you have faith in, power objects. Ultimately, the best advice I've ever come on, and it's pretty sickening advice, but the goal is to survive these things, is Frank Herbert's advice in Dune about fear. And he says, fear comes like a wind. It comes. And the way you meet it is you meet it. And you wait, and it blows, and it blows, and it blows itself out. And then you're alone again. And that's what you have to do. And then in terms of practical instruction, there are ways to navigate through hard spots. Breath control, singing. Singing is wonderful. We tend to suffer silently. And if you get into a pressurized place on a psychedelic, I don't think it's a good idea to squeeze down and meet it like that. I think it's much better to sing, to circulate huge volumes of oxygen through your body and just send your whole metabolism spiraling off in some other direction. Shamanism was defined by the foremost commentator on it, Merciliade, as the archaic techniques of ecstasy. Notice its techniques. And this is really important. This is not a religion or an ontology or a set of beliefs like Buddhism, Hinduism, Catholicism, you name it. It's a set of techniques. And the techniques deliver the experience. And then out of the experience, one creates whatever models of the universe seem appropriate. But this is what science was before science. This is what religion was before religion. And it's deep. It's the deepest thing there is. Our society, living in ignorance of this, is infantile and destructive and narcissistic and materialistic and the whole gamut, because we can't touch the gold in life. It's hard for us. It's very elusive. It's far from us. Authenticity is fleeting, and we require psychotherapists and self-affirmation and all this stuff to hang on to it. How I got into this, like the gentleman who asked the question, is by being in the Amazon, by having searched India to see, what can you show me? And they couldn't show me anything. They wanted me to sweep the ashram for 12 years, and then something wonderful was going to happen. But then when I got to South America, I said, what can you show me? And this guy said, let's sharpen our machetes. We'll go out here and get some of this snake vine and come back, and I'll show you. And by 10 o'clock that night, I was sobbing in the guy's arms. He'd shown me. I was a convert. I'd sweep his courtyard for 12 years without asking.
My daughter, who I haven't seen for a while, is coming today. And it caused me to think of an incident that happened to she and I years ago here at Esalen. And it's a story which makes no sense whatsoever, but it really, truly happened, as far as I can tell. But it has all the qualities that bedevil this kind of thing. And what it was I was, as I am now, scholar in residence. It must have been some 10 years or so, 8 years or so ago. So Clea would have been like 9, and I would have been 40. So we were both younger and more naive. And it was dinner time at the lodge, and it was this time of year and this time of weather. And the fog had been coming all day in and out in the garden. And it was, and we genuflect here, God love him, to Carlos Castaneda, it was that very strange time of day, which only lasts a few minutes between daytime and nighttime, the crack between the world, I believe. It's interesting in South America and also in Hawaii, at precisely that moment, every day, there are certain species of Lepidoptera that rearrange themselves. In other words, that come out from wherever they've been hiding for 24 hours, fly around furiously for 5 minutes, and then disappear again for 24 hours. But anyway, it was precisely that time of day, and the fog was coming in and out of the garden, and we were not in a mood for anything peculiar. We were intent on dinner, and we were walking the path through the garden, and suddenly, as this fog moved and cleared, coming down one of the rows was a bunny, a small rabbit, except that it had very small, short horns. Now, some of you may know the creature called the jackalope. The jackalope is a large jackrabbit with a pair of antelope horns, and it is a creature known only to exist above certain low-class bars scattered across California and Oregon. It's up on the wall, the jackalope. It's something you kid tourists with. As far as I could see, this was a baby jackalope about this high, and it crossed the trail no more than 5 feet in front of us. We both saw it, and our attitude was not amazement or an awareness that we were entering into a paranormal dimension. Both of us, I think our reaction was, come on. And then immediately behind it was a man, a very thin, not particularly healthy-looking man with a shaved head, wearing something like a gray running suit. And he was running crouched. He was with his hands out like this. He was trying to catch the jack-a-bunny. And when he saw us, he appeared very confused and stood up and turned and walked the other way. And I just took her by the elbow and I said, let's get out of here. And then we went to dinner, and we've talked about it immediately after and since. And as far as anybody can reasonably and decently tell, this is the straight story on what happened. Well, it doesn't make any sense. First of all, the earth doesn't move from its pinions. But what does it say? It says that attention falling into a certain place of non-attention is set up for something like this to happen. And I can't explain it. I don't think it's explainable. It's sort of like, when you study quantum physics and they tell you that a black hole mostly puts out electrons, but the theory allows that it could eject Miatas and grand pianos, except that it would be very rare for it to eject a grand piano. But the theory does not preclude the ejection of grand pianos. So it's something like that, or it's a group hallucination, or it's a bewitchment, or, and it begins to proliferate. I was thinking about it last night or this morning, because I was in that place where I saw it happen. I was thinking, maybe Esalen lasts a really long time. Like maybe it's sort of like the Piazza San Marco in Venice, or the Central Aryan Stonehenge. Maybe we're actually starting something here that will last so long that for the next 5,000 years, people will relate to the Esalen Garden, and that somehow it's a nexus for others on strange missions. Now, the other thing about that story that I like, or that relieved me, is I guess the way to put it, is notice that it's absurd. And by being absurd, it's self-canceling. Suppose instead of a jackalope, which is an absurd creature to begin with, suppose it had been a gray of the wraparound eye type that are apparently trading high technology to the government for human fetal tissue, those people, then you would have had a real dilemma on your hands, because grays are objects of cultural fascination. In other words, if you see a gray, you just become part of a statistical body of people who've seen one. And so it's like more problematic. It's not that it's a non-reality, it's that it's a sort of a non-reality. This is, I think, part of the clue to understanding alien abductions and the way we generate information. If I tell you that I was up late last night and couldn't sleep and walked along the cliffs over Esalen, and that I encountered a shining disk, and that I then had my navel lint was removed by a team of extraterrestrial cosmetologists, this is evidence for an already existing body of data. If you say, well, you should call MUFON, they'd be very interested in this, or you should call somebody else. If I tell you I was restless last night and walked the cliffs of Esalen, and that I encountered Bugs Bunny in the company of Patrick Swayze, people would just say, you're nuts. You know, it's not sanctioned, it's not allowed, and nobody gives a hoot or takes it seriously for a moment, because it serves no one's agenda.
over. Begin. Line. Triangle. Pentagon. Game over. Begin. Line. Triangle. Square. Pentagon. Game over. Begin. Line. Game over.
Face of doubt, we will not perish, we will fly high beyond the clouds, soaring past what is known yet possible, a dream found latent yet near, smaller than the atom, a culture in between the cells of what is possible yet beyond. We find ourselves the treasure, utter alchemy of one's inner value to change the stakes of life itself through infinity means the sensibility to see past how things are and to how things really are. Can we find it through the sense dimensions we're all to unite and bring this hidden value, meaning the shift in awareness has been made unified feature. Can we see our way beyond what is possible yet beyond? We enjoy each of you for your own unique cause, build your own world. This energy has to end, a future that awaits just beyond the clouds. Can we find our way back? What's left for us in our times of shame and distress? We